Hi, I'm Dave Klein, and this is the Cymulate Cybersecurity Newscast. SentinelOne came out with a really great report this week that looked at the LockBit ransomware gang and their 3.0 version of their attack toolkit, also known as LockBit Black. And they found some very interesting things. They found that they attack VMware Horizon servers who are vulnerable to Log4j. That's going to be around for quite a while, I think. And inject a web shell. More interesting than taking advantage of Log4j, it also takes advantage of DLL sideloading using the Windows Defender command line to push a malicious DLL. Really interesting report. So what is DLL sideloading? DLL sideloading is the fact that the Windows operating system, when looking for a DLL it can't find, goes through a series of checks to find a DLL it can use. Well, if you don't lock down the search parameters to do that, you could pick a directory or a cache where you have a malicious DLL and inject it into the mix, which they did in this case, to launch Cobalt Beacon as the next phase of the attack. So I'll put a link to that report, and more importantly, to a Microsoft FAQ and tech bulletin that talks about how you can take your GPO and really lock down to prevent DLL sideloading. That'll be in the notes section of the video. Joe Sullivan, former head of security for Uber and of Facebook, faces potentially 20 years in prison. This stems from a breach that occurred back in 2016 when attackers got into a poorly guarded AWS database instance. It had no username and password, and were able to get 53 million subscribers and drivers detailed information. At the time, this was thought to be the entire Uber database of drivers and customers. And they had approached Joe Sullivan and blackmailed him for $100,000 in order not to release this information. Well, it got out a month later, and what we found out is there was a $158 million fine for Uber, but he was personally found to be responsible for not disclosing this information. And therefore, he's up on charges that could have him go to jail for about 20 years. This is kind of an important news story. You think about companies and the individuals who work there, and you think about other types of industries like stock markets and financial investments. In financial investments, if you're an accountant and you're working and you see malfeasance, it really is your responsibility to report it. Now we're starting to see this in the cybersecurity world. In this case, Joe Sullivan should have reported that instead of hiding it and trying to put it under the rug, especially in such a large company like this. Spain suffered some critical infrastructure breaches this week. They announced that they had arrested 2 people who were insiders working for their nuclear leak detection sensor program. Basically, in a country that has 22% of the power provided by nuclear energy, they have a series of 800 sensors across the country that are early warning systems if there's any leaks that occur to try to prevent any kind of natural disaster. There's not much information on the insiders, but that the fact that they disabled 1/3 of all the sensors, that's about 300 sensors, and brought down a management interface to manage the other ones so they wouldn't be seen and stuff like that. Not a lot of information about this, but quite scary. And I think it really points to the important part if you're running critical infrastructure, really understand the people who are working for you and have a really good insider threat detection and remediation program, finding these people and preventing them from doing things like that. And all the things that you manage prevent 1 or 2 people from taking things down. Just Talk, a Chinese competitor to WhatsApp and Signal and communication programs like that, were found to have some real issues this week. 1, they were not end-to-end encrypted, and 2, they were storing everyone's data, information, and chat sessions and audio sessions in plain text on a Huawei-hosted server in China. Awful story. We're talking about 20 million subscribers, and on top of that, even a kids edition called Just Talk Kids with 1 million users. So really a terrible situation here. It's real caveat emptor that as a buyer beware, we need to watch what we put onto our phones and who we choose for software. But again, I hope the Chinese authorities do the right thing and go after this company, because again, if this were in the United States or Europe, this would have been a career-ending situation for that company. And that's the news for the week. I'm Dave Klein. This has been the Cymulate Cybersecurity Newscast. Stay safe.